What's your name?
Chad.
Chad. What's your last name?
Gorman.
Gorman?
Dorman.
Dorman. Have you ever been here before?
Really one time for fighting with Dad.
Don't be doing that, man. Don't be beating your head on the wall, okay?
Yeah.
We've got new body cam footage that was just sent to us from Clermont County in Ohio. It's after Chad Dorman was arrested on June 15th. We'll see his transport, we'll see him checking in, getting x-rayed, all this stuff, all the things. Thanks to, again, the docket. I'll link to him below. I'm sure he'll go over it if he's not already going over it by the time I publish this video. The docket is really good about getting information, just digging and digging until we can get more of the full story. So I'll play all that body cam footage for you in a second. First off, I want to go over what to anticipate we'll see and some of the paperwork sent to us. You're going to see Chad Dorman beating his head against the wall briefly. It's a little bit uneventful until that moment. And Chad also speaks about the time, the incident, he got into it with his dad. Previously, we learned about Chad Dorman's history, and we knew there was some type of altercation with his father. But apparently Chad's father did not press charges or didn't show up for court. That never went anywhere else. But in this case, in this time, when Chad struck down his 3 little beautiful boys, of course, it went a lot farther. One of the cops standing there will ask Chad, have you ever been here before? And Chad goes, I think one time for fighting my dad. So according to the body cam footage, and the time isn't always right, but they do say it's June 15th, it starts around, I guess, 21:06, which would mean it's 9:06 p.m. Maybe it really took that long to get him down there and get him booked, but it could have been earlier in the day. You will see coming up a lot of redactions. A lot of times it goes silent. That's how they gave us the video. Of course, they have to remove personal information or private info or anything perhaps that would harm the investigation. To me, Chad still looks a little shell-shocked. He looks beet red. Maybe he's in the sun a lot, and we'll go over his occupation. He's also pretty stoic, and he's not really crying. It reminds me of when they transported Chris Watts. And at this point, Chad kind of plays with his handcuffs at one point, and that's when he does the dramatic beating his head against the wall. I don't know if that represents any emotion of, is he thinking about what he just did? Is he becoming sorry for what he just did? But again, he's not really crying. He beats his head against the wall. The cop tells him, don't do that. They take him to another room. They have him check his mouth and make sure he's not smuggling anything in there. They do the whole thing, you know. They strip him down, lift, you know, do the bend down and cough and everything. They put on that turtle suit, which it's green, and they call it all different things. It's there to prevent people from harming themselves. They get him up on a sled, which looks like an x-ray, I believe. Make sure he's really not smuggling any dangerous contraband in there. When they have him in the room and they're getting the turtle suit on him, he does ask, do I get a phone call? And they're pretty kind to him. They tell him, you know, at some point later. So I wonder who he wants to call. I wonder what he thinks is going to happen from that phone call. I'm reading over here from Clermont County Sheriff's Office, Dorman's booking history. It's redacted, but we see that same shell-shocked kind of mugshot. We see his date of birth, which was hard to hear in court, but I did hear him say March 1st. It is indeed March 1st, 1991. His education says 12, so it sounds like he's a high school graduate. They have his employer as a laborer, it was at least, with an insulation company. He was born in Cincinnati. He's a white male with fair skin, sandy hair, short hairstyle. He has a beard, blue eyes, no glasses, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and weighing 170 pounds with a medium build. This is the full booking from the Clermont County Sheriff's Office, and indeed it was June 15th at 9:27 p.m. when he was booked. So it took a while, I guess, to get him in there and get him all situated. It says alcohol, no. So unlike previously when I thought Chad must have been drunk to pull off such a horrible act, this says alcohol, no. Phone calls, yes. Resist, no. They're saying he did not resist arrest. It lists the previous arrest for Chad Christopher Dorman, as July 25th, 2010. So 13 years ago, the booking date, and the release date was the very next day, July 26, 2010. It just says served to. Arresting agency was the Clermont County Sheriff's Office. So I'm assuming that's the incident with his father, Keith Dorman. And it's interesting how Chad put it. I think one time for fighting my dad, he was there before, 13 years ago. According to records, Chad was like choking his dad. I don't know if his mom and dad, have been through it likely with Chad. And of course, I'm sure wanted him to go on a different path. But I don't know if they coddled him a little bit too. There was mentions of if Chad would have gotten a bond or a reasonable bail, something someone could have paid, not 20 million. I'm glad he got 20 million. I'm glad he got no bond eventually. But there was talk of his mom or dad being co-signers or something on the bond. I don't know all the details, and that doesn't mean his parents wanted him out. But you just wonder if Chad could have been held longer for trying to harm his dad way back when. Would that have changed the trajectory of anything? We don't know. I feel bad for his parents and all especially his wife. We also have the Clermont County Sheriff's Office offense report, and I'm just going to read some highlights, anything we might not know for this felony. It happened at a single-family home, as we know, on the Laurel Lindell Road home in New Richmond, Ohio. There are redactions in this document too. They talk about the 911 calls, which we've already listened to, 2 of them. I've only seen 2. I don't know if a 911 call from the mother actually exists or not. We haven't been given that. I've seen it reported. That the mom called 911. It would make sense if she did, but we don't have that audio. Perhaps in court. So some of the only details here we learn in the narrative supplement is from one officer arriving on the scene with Deputy Diemling. This is the narrative by Ryan Feelhauer. He said he arrived on the scene with Deputy Diemling. The scene was already very active with police and EMS units. I observed Deputy Sparks standing by a young child, victim number 1, by the front of the house, who was being treated by Monroe EMS. There was also a hysterical female kneeling by the child who was identified as the child's mother. I was later informed that she also suffered a gunshot wound to her hand. Deputy Sparks confirmed with me that the shooter, Chad Dorman, was in custody and was secured in Deputy Rudd's vehicle, and Deputy Rudd was with him. I asked where the other victims were, and they pointed towards the front of the yard near the driveway and street. I saw one EMS member performing chest compressions on a small boy, victim number 2, who appeared to be around 3 or 4 years old. I went over to help with medical care, and the EMS member stopped CPR, and said the child was deceased. After a closer look, it was obvious he was deceased from a gunshot wound to the left side of his head. I covered the child with a sheet provided by EMS. I was informed that a third child, victim 3, was in the back of the ambulance being treated for a gunshot wound. I was notified shortly after this that he died also. So it was some confusion. The prosecutors have spoken in court of Chad shooting one of the little boys from behind as he ran away. He tried to get away from his dad. And when you hear the child was shot from behind, I think I made the assumption he was shot in the back. They will talk in here about all 3 children being shot in the head. So I'm not sure if one little boy suffered a back and head gunshot wound, or are they all head injuries? It's not clear, but we know it's tragic. And these little boys had their homegoing celebration, and if you haven't seen that photo, oh my goodness, of the rainbow, I'll put the photo here. They said it was quite, people went silent and there was just like a rainbow over the church. If I can find any footage of any coverage of the celebration, I'll try and link it below, but I won't include it in this video, so we can just make sure to stay on the good side of everyone and not worry about any copyrights. So there's a lot of narratives here. Another narrative taken by Zachary Huchin speaks of arriving on the scene while EMS was tending to a patient. He observed multiple subjects unresponsive in the front yard, so he began to secure the scene. And a lot of this, you'll see just a lot of black squares in these narratives too. Now this is from Jeffrey S. Rudd. So he speaks of arriving on the scene on Laurel Lindell Road for an active shooter call. When I arrived, I ran up to the driveway and observed Deputy Sparks performing CPR on a small child. I looked to my right and observed Deputy Popham had a male secured in handcuffs. I went to Deputy Popham and he advised me to take the subject, who was identified as one Chad Dorman, and secure him in my cruiser. I escorted Mr. Dorman to my cruiser. As I was escorting him, I noticed that Mr. Dorman had a large blood stain on his back right shoulder. So yeah, we do see it here. It might be flipped, the camera, but this is my back right shoulder. And you do see some here too. I also noticed that Mr. Dorman had small blood stain on the back left shoulder and here too. Jeffrey Rudd also wrote, as I was escorting him to my cruiser, he started to talk. I advised Mr. Dorman to keep quiet and he was secured in the rear of my cruiser. This is probably the cop who told Chad to just shut up. He has the effing right to remain silent. Use it. I bet you that's that guy. Here's another narrative taken by Scott Douglas, but I guess it's, yes, Corporal Scott. He wrote, he arrived at 4:39 p.m. There were already units on scene and 2 juvenile victims were in the yard deceased. The 3rd victim was in an ambulance at the scene, and the wife mother was being treated for a gunshot wound in another squad, and her oldest child was in there with her. Wow. So they cleared the house looking for additional victims. No one else was located. And according to reports from the mother of the victims, we were certain that her children had been accounted for and there was not anyone else needing medical care. A narrative taken by Jason Swalling. So this talks about arriving June 15th, 4:49 at Laurel Lindell home. They made contact and they were briefed as to 3 confirmed deceased, 1 lying in the side yard near the porch stoop, 1 lying in the side yard near the driveway entrance, and the last in the Monroe Township Fire EMS Life Squad. Jason was informed the mother of the 3 deceased juveniles had suffered an apparent gunshot wound to the left hand and is in the Life Squad awaiting ground transport to University of Cincinnati Hospital. Sergeant Crouch had requested that Jason attempt to speak with the mother, who was apparently accompanied by her 14-year-old stepdaughter, who was reportedly the only victim not harmed. And you know they mean physically, not harmed. Emotionally is a whole nother ball game for that young girl. So again, this talks about Chad being 32, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and they list all of the counts in the Clermont County Common Pleas Court. And there's a lot of them. All the aggravated murder charges, firearms, and we have a press release from June 23rd, 2023. Speaking of the indictment of Chad for taking away his 3, 4, and 7-year-old boys, 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, 4 separate counts of felonious assault. All those aggravating circumstances subject Chad to the possibility of the death penalty. He entered a not guilty plea on June 23rd. We saw that court. If you haven't, check out my previous video. This speaks about Chad slaughtering his 3 boys, and it speaks about the manner in which he shot all 3 in the head. And one boy, the 7-year-old, makes sense, the oldest, he just ran from Chad, running approximately 300 feet, if only he could have gotten away from Chad before Chad shot him from behind. So we don't know, we know it was from behind, but we don't know where. I think when you hear from behind, you assume it landed in the back, but I shouldn't make that assumption. Then it says Chad approached the boy and executed him at a close range. So now he's held without bond. Again, we look forward to his next time in court, July 5th, 2023 at 11 a.m. for a pretrial hearing. And there's another narrative supplement before we go watch the whole video. This is from Seth Sparks. So it was June 15th, 2023 at 4:16 when he responded to the home. So en route, he heard all these updates. He knew the shooter was a white male wearing a green shirt and blue jeans, but he arrived on scene with Deputy Popham at 4:26. He deployed his patrol rifle. He observed Chad sitting on the porch. He could hear a female screaming. He gave verbal commands, stand up and walk. We've seen this body cam video. You know, the dispatch told him the name was Chad Dorman. At this time, I could see what I believed to be a long brown rifle next to the shooter's left hand. So I don't know if there was really a rifle sitting right there. It's hard to see in the body cam footage, but Chad should feel pretty fortunate cops didn't take him out right then and there. If they thought a rifle was laying right there and he was not responding to their commands to stand up and walk towards us, they would have been well within their right to take Chad down. But it says, due to the need to assess the injuries to victims, we began to approach Chad and continued giving him verbal commands to stand up. Chad continued to ignore commands and remain seated. So we know he could hear them because they were just yelling at him. We heard it on the body cam footage. After passing a camper in the front yard, I was able to observe 3 bodies of juvenile boys laying in the front yard. I continued to approach the shooter and asked Deputy Popham to hold cover for me while I attempted to grab the shooter. I grabbed Chad by the left arm and placed him onto the ground. I secured his hands while Deputy Popham placed handcuffs on. So after Chad was in custody, I ran somewhere, it's redacted, and the 3 juveniles to assess injuries. He must have run to the mother, I'm assuming. I informed dispatch the shooter was in custody and to send EMS for the 3 children. In an attempt to get the kids to medics sooner, I grabbed one and ran towards the runway. EMS began to arrive on scene. I sat the juvenile down on the ground and began to perform CPR until EMS took over my position. I secured my rifle in my patrol vehicle and went back to gather info. I went back to the scene to the life squad for a gunshot wound to her left thumb. Laura, the wife, must have a gunshot wound in her left thumb. I made contact with Redacted, who said she was the sister of the victim. I obtained her info and provided it to Sergeant Feelhauer. So the sister, if it's Rachel, Laura's sister, he's saying he made contact with her. We don't know if she was there actually on the scene or if he called her. So we'll learn all that. That's interesting to note because as we went over in the previous video, there's a rumor that Laura, the wife, you know, her sister was right there helping her pack to leave Chad. We don't know if that's true or not, but it's interesting he says he's made contact with one of the victims. Now let's watch this video. 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord does not delay as though he were unable to act and is not slow about his promise, as some count slowness, but is extraordinarily patient towards you, not wishing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. And this morning when I read that, I was like, yeah, even guys like Chad, even horrific acting people like Chad, there is still hope if he would come to repentance. I know some are just doomed to destruction. I'm not saying everyone's going to repent and just follow God and change their ways, but God doesn't want anyone to perish. So that's it. Let's just watch all this body cam video and stay tuned for updates about this case and many more. Take care.
Walk through these doors and just kind of face that window on your right there for a minute. Just face it. So
What's your name?
Chad
Chad. What's your last name?
Dorman.
Gorman?
Dorman.
Dorman. Have you ever been here before?
Listen, one time for fight with dad.
Just give me the word when you get it and I'll... Yeah. my head on Walker.
Yeah.
My next question would be, do they want us to go ahead and book you?
That's what we're on standby.
Is that what they're checking?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I asked that already too.
Oh, actually, it's good to hear. Do you have any weapons or drugs on you?
No.
Anything that's gonna poke me, stick me, or hurt me?
No.
Okay. Put your hands up there. Do a pat down. Do everything like policy.
That's Shane,
Sean's.
Shane.
Just taking the belt off. You see the mama's foot? Bend it up here, can you? There you go. Alright, we'll just step straight up to the counter, in front of that blue bag there to the left. Is he getting evidence bags or? Push. Let me see your hands. I'm gonna take this cuff off, put your hand up here, palm down, okay? Same with this one. We're gonna go down to the end of the counter down here and we're gonna hang a left.
You got the dress come out now?
Yeah. Turn left. You're fine, you can put your hands down to your side. Be a gown.
Yeah.
What size shoe you wear? We're going here. 10. Size 10 shoe. Go ahead and take your shirt off and hand it to me. Phone call. Once we get done with the process and they're finished with you, yes, we'll let you make a phone call. Hold on a second. Those jeans in there. And take your boxers off. Hold your hands up in the air. You see in the mouth. Lift your tongue. Take one finger, go around your gum line, top and bottom, please. Alright, let me see behind your ears. Alright, Alright, lift your penis. Lift your testicles. Alright, turn around. See the bottom of your left foot. Wiggle your toes. Alright, your left foot now. Alright, face this wall. Squat down like a baseball catcher and cough hard 3 times. Alright.
Push him.
There you go.
You know what, 448.
People probably tomorrow, they'll probably talk to you at some point tomorrow, would be my guess. And then we'll go from there, okay?
Okay.
So step out here. I'm gonna step up on that sled.
You want to face that wall straight in? By the way. Pressure leg, quarter shoulder width apart. Treat your hands to the side of the scramble. There's a sign that says look here. Get up there the whole time, don't move, don't talk. Take about 15 seconds.
Alright, you step off towards me. You go that way. Alright. Set down here. Stand right here. place your hands up or on the counter.